This radio program is PG-13. Parents strongly caution some material may be inappropriate for children under the age of 13.
The following program is sponsored by Michael W. Smith. The views expressed on the following program are those of the host and not necessarily those of staff, management, or ownership.
Arizona, Phoenix, this is Brother Mike. Back on the radio, welcome to my silver anniversary year on 1010 AM Christian Radio. KXXT, may God richly bless you. Thanks for tuning in today. Today's Bible study, Peter leaves Jesus. So long. Catch you later. See you on the flip side. Hey, will you call somebody and tell them the radio program's on? Got a great Bible study for you tonight. Yesterday's Bible study was on Peter's conversion. Today's Bible study is on his backsliding. This is Brother Mike. I am the professional counselor at the Arizona Deliverance Center. We're downtown on 15th Avenue, just south of Osborne Road. It's the red brick building. HardcoreChristianity.com is a website. You'll see all of our ministry services there. We have 2 live services every week, Thursday, Friday nights at 7 o'clock. Ladies' night is Tuesday at 6:30 p.m., and my Sunday morning podcast is at 9 o'clock. Our worship service is Saturday at 4:30, the only worship service of its kind anywhere in the state of Arizona, where the saints gather together to sing in tongues. It is so spectacular. We have a deliverance service after the worship service on Saturdays at 4:30. Our monthly healing service is packed. Get there early. There are no seats left. The last Friday of the month at 7 p.m. May God richly bless you. Yesterday's broadcast was on the legendary Simon Peter. Today's is the same. Only yesterday he got saved. Today he loses his salvation. Let's follow along quickly. Matthew chapter 26. Jesus is talking to his disciples after the Last Supper, and he explains to them what's going to happen in the near future. Quote, "All you will be offended because of me this night. For it is written, I will smite the shepherd, and the sheep shall be scattered." He's quoting out of the prophet Zechariah, chapter 13. Then Jesus says, quote, "After I'm risen, I will go before you into Galilee." And they go on talking a little while longer, and Jesus washes the disciples' feet. You remember that? And, of course, Peter pipes up again. He was always piping up. He ran his mouth like a busted chainsaw. He was the New Testament version of Aaron, who also ran his mouth like a busted chainsaw in the Old Testament. Peter says to Jesus, "No, you're not washing my feet." Jesus said, "If I don't wash your feet, you can't have a part in this ministry." And then Simon Peter then says, "Hey, wash me all over the place then. Wash my whole body then." Of course, he was running his mouth, trying to make himself look good in front of the other disciples. Peter had deep-seated insecurities that he covered up by being a class clown and a person who talked all the time. You've met those kinds of people, I'm sure. And Jesus says to Simon Peter, "Simon, Simon." Uh-oh, that's a bad sign there, because Jesus had named him Peter. But here at the Last Supper, he's calling him Simon again. Simon was his pre-Christ name. "Simon, Simon, behold, Satan has desired to have you so that he can sift you like wheat. But I prayed for you that your faith would not fail. And when you are converted, strengthen your brethren." Can you believe he said that? Epistrefo was the Greek word. It means to be reconverted. That meant he loses his salvation and has to be reconverted. What a shocking scenario, absolutely stunning. because Peter had the biggest mouth of all the disciples, and he was involved in everything that happened. He was always doing something involved in the ministry. The rest of the disciples looked up to him. They respected him. And Peter then starts to run his mouth again. Here it goes, blabbing away. He says, quote, Lord, I'm ready to go with you both to prison and to death. And Jesus kind of shook his head, lowered his head, and then said, kind of gently, I tell you, Peter, the cock shall not crow this day before you have denied me 3 times. Before you shall 3 times deny that you know me. Greek words eido, have ever seen me. Absolutely shocking. Totally shocking. Well, Jesus got arrested, as you know. Peter cut off Malchus' ear. Jesus healed the ear. Told Peter put his sword up. Then Jesus gets the soldiers to release the disciples, and they run away. They all run away in fear. Jesus left alone. He's arrested. Judas, of course, betrayed him and went back to the synagogue and tried to give the money back and wanted Jesus let go. But it was too late. Well, Jesus is taken away by the soldiers, and he's headed toward the praetorium, and he's going to stand trial before Caiaphas, and you know the story. Well, Peter was following behind Jesus, John chapter 18, verse 15. And so did another disciple, and most people think that was John. And that disciple was known to the high priest. And he went in with Jesus into the palace of the high priest. Wow. That's interesting. We don't get any explanation on that, how he knew him and why he was allowed just to go in. Very strange. Well, Peter wasn't allowed to go in. It says in verse 16, Peter stood at the door outside. Then John came out to get Peter. And he talked to the door woman and said, "Hey, you got to let this guy in." And since they knew John, they let Peter in. So Peter goes in. Remarkable. Then the damsel said to him, right after he got in, she takes another closer look at Peter. Greek word paideski. A paideski is a very young woman who is a slave. So we're looking at somebody in late teens, early 20s, something like that. She says to him, "Are you also one of this man's disciples?" And he said, "I am not." Then the servants and the officers were standing there where Peter was, and they had made a fire of coals because it was cold outside. They warmed themselves, and Peter stood with them, warming himself. And while he was doing that, they said to him, several people, "Are not you one of his disciples?" They kind of recognized him. And he denied it and said, "I am not." And then somebody who was related to Malchus, the dude that got his ear cut off, it says one of the servants of the high priest being his kinsman, that's the Greek word sunganes, which means a relative. He was a relative of Malchus, said, quote, "Did I not see you in the garden with him? Didn't I see you?" Somebody else later on said, "Of a truth, this fellow was with him. He's a Galilean." You can tell. Well, Peter then freaks, and here's where he lost his salvation. Listen carefully. Mark 14:71. Quote, Peter began to curse and swear. The Greek word for curse there is anathema, and it means to place a curse and excommunicate someone. Only Peter did it to himself. he placed a curse on his own self and covered it up with curse words. And then he says another lie, quote, I know not this man of whom you speak. Greek word for know there is eido, see. I've never seen the guy before. He claims he'd never seen Jesus before. And at that very moment, walking through the praetorium on the way out after the trial was over, Jesus was in the walkway there and looked up and saw Peter over by the fire of coals and stared at him. And when he did that, they met eye to eye. Peter remembered the words that Jesus said about him. The cock's going to crow. And you're not even going to admit to ever seeing me, and you're going to do it 3 times. And it says, quote, Peter went out and wept bitterly. Bitterly, Greek word pikros. Pikros means viciously or violently. He went out and literally cried his guts up. And Peter, at that moment, left Christ and left the church. You know the rest of the story. Of course, the tomb was empty, and Peter and John ran to the tomb, and Jesus wasn't there. Later on, Jesus appeared to the group, all of them, including Peter, showing them that he had been resurrected, and he showed them his hands and his side. And then the second time he appeared to him was Doubting Thomas was finally there, and Doubting Thomas finally collapsed and said, my Lord and my God. Peter was at that meeting, but Peter had not been reconverted, even though he saw Jesus raised from the dead twice. And then after that, on the Sea of Tiberias, John chapter 21, Jesus appears to them on the shore, and he'd already fixed a fire of coals. And he told them to cast their nets out on the right side, and they'll catch something. And they did, and they were swamped with fishes. Peter came in, dove in, and came to Jesus. And Jesus asked him 3 times if he loved him, and 3 times Peter said he did. And that's when Peter was reconverted and became a follower of Jesus again. Up until that moment, he had left the Lord and left the church and had gone back to fishing because he was consumed with guilt. Guilt is like a cancer to a Christian. If you need prayer for guilt, 602-636-5800. God wants to help you and save you and deliver you. See you next time.
The views expressed on this program are those of the host and not necessarily those of staff, management, or ownership. This program was sponsored by Michael W. Smith.